These media companies like to be very preachy. They like to tell us how there are moral superiors atop their glorious ivory tower in New York City looking down at all the peasants who are living in their squalor with their bigoted views. But as it turns out, the Washington Post has their own wage gap. And the Washington Post Guild has released the numbers showing that, white men get paid most of the money. Naturally, the Washington Post is furious, saying, how dare you release this? It's not true. The Washington Post, who believes, they're the bastions of morality. Not everyone there, but for the most part. Washington Post has published fake news before, and they get to do whatever they want because democracy dies in darkness. But they have a wage gap of their own. And now their staff are upset about it. And this is the main point I want to get. We'll read this story, but the reason I'm covering this particular story is that, the other day, BuzzFeed wrote a headline insinuating that 2 black men fought to the death over fried chicken. It was one of the most obnoxious and racist fake stories I've ever seen published, because the story is not true. And what bothers me is that these media companies pretend to be arbiters of morality, and in reality, they are just as awful as anybody else. Why did BuzzFeed write that headline? Did you know that in Chicago, last weekend, 4 people died? BuzzFeed didn't write about that. BuzzFeed wrote a fake story about 2 black men fighting to the death for fried chicken. And it never happened. What really happened was that 2 guys got into an argument. One guy stabbed him and ran off. It just so happened to have been at a Popeyes. That's about it. They weren't fighting over chicken. No transactions were made. And this is what we get. This is the media we have. So it's funny to me. ABC News can kill this major story, but they can hunt down that whistleblower and fire him in 2 seconds. The media is dirty. They're corrupt. And this is just another example. So let's read the news and rag on media once again. Daily Wire reports the loudest voices pushing the gender wage gap myth often fail to adhere to their own standards. The latest example comes from the Washington Post, which, other than some decent fact checks on the subject of Glenn Kessler, continues to insist the pay gap is real and due to discrimination against women. They say, a report from the Post's union, however, shows that the legacy media outlet has its own gender wage gap problem and race wage gap. The report found that the median pay for women working at the Post is $91,816, while the median pay for men is $109,928. Oh man, that's like what, 10-20%? The median pay for hourly employees puts women ahead, with women making $30.77 per hour while men make just $25.84 per hour. The union or guild then broke down the median salaries of Post employees by gender and race. The median salaries for white men, $111,000. Black men, $99,000. And they were higher than the median salary of white women. So here's the meat and potatoes. They can rag all day and night on Donald Trump and his supporters and the bigots and all of that stuff. And then when it comes down to it, they're just as bad or worse. And I got to stress that BuzzFeed article, man. It really, really made me angry. BuzzFeed has a choice. They can report any story they want. So they took a story about 2 guys who got into an argument. One guy died. And they said, let's make it a fight about fried chicken. Why? That's what I ask. Why? What about a story about 2 black men fighting for fried chicken is worth publishing on BuzzFeed? Because this kind of senseless violence happens all the time in Baltimore, in Chicago, in Detroit, and they never write about it. So why now, BuzzFeed? And this brings me back to this point. I'm sorry if I'm derailing it. That it's just what we can see is complete hypocrisy from these media companies. Deadspin, right? So you saw what happened with Deadspin when all the employees walked out and their media issued a statement saying they just don't want us speaking truth to power. Oh, please. You guys don't speak truth to power. You complain about Orange Man. What are you doing? You wrote an article about some kids in Washington, D.C. standing around doing nothing with all of the moral outrage as if the world was ending. But this is exactly what it is. I'm not going to name the company because I don't want to get sued. But there's one major leftist digital publication that was run by right-wing, anarcho-capitalist dudes who published far-left social justice pro-Bernie stuff because it made them money. It's called grifting. Look at Deadspin. Deadspin says, we're a sports website, but we should be able to write about politics because it gets better clicks. That's called grifting, dude. Grifting. When you're a sports website, but you write about politics because you know you'll make money doing it. So let me wrap it all back up here to the Washington Post. Why do they write about the perils of the wage gap and racism and all that other stuff? They're not the worst offender, mind you. They do it because it gets clicks. They do it because it's pandering to their audience, but they don't practice what they preach. They say the report also found that merit raises at the company seem to favor white male journalists. Uh-oh. White employees received 75.7% of all merit-based pay raises, while men received 51.7% of them, meaning near parity among the sexes. The report that performance evaluation scores allegedly favored white employees. Employees of the Post are rated on a scale of 1 to 5, and the report found that 85% of those employees who received a score of 4 or higher were white. The report found that 37% of those given a score lower than 3 were employees of color, meaning 63% of those receiving low scores were also white. Post employees are 64.4% white. Complicated data. But can I offer up a few criticisms? If you employ people based on their race and not their skills, would you be at all surprised when you see this? First, the country is predominantly white. What is it, around like 67%? And that's dropping, mostly because liberals don't have kids. But if you're at a company and you say, we have a list of 100 people, we need to hire 50, and the top are white because of white privilege or because historical wealth and they went to better schools, and you say, we're not going to choose these, we're going to go down until we find someone of the appropriate race. More importantly, if 30% of this country is black, that means you might actually see the same breakdown of skill across the board, but because there are more white people, at the top, you'll only see a few black, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, right? Well, if you want equity, that means for every white person, you gotta have a black person or an Asian person, okay? Not national level statistics. So then you start going down in skill level to find, people who aren't as good at what they do. Don't be surprised if they then don't get merit-based raises. Now, when it comes to men versus women, we can see it's basically the same. There's no real difference for the most part between men and women getting merit-based raises. There you go. Hey, that proves something, right? I think the problem is a lot of these companies, well, they're hypocrites. That's the main point I want to make. But a lot of these companies, it's the hypocrisy. That's the point. What I want to say is internally, they recognize that these systems have bad outcomes, but they write whatever they think they got to write because it makes them money. And that's why you end up with this skewed system. They say the Post Guild claims the disparity persists even when controlling for age and job description. But there are numerous other factors that can lead to the gap, such as experience and negotiating ability. It is amusing to see a company like the Post, which is so committed to painting women as victims of mass discrimination, grapple with its own discrimination claims. The same has happened to lawmakers who push the gender wage gap. It's kind of like, remember all those Republicans who were anti-gay and then turned out to be gay? Like, what's up with that? It doesn't happen anymore. President Barack Obama and his administration were one of the most persistent purveyors of the wage gap myth. A report of the Obama White House found the median salary for men was higher than the median salary for women. The Obama administration countered by pointing out the discrepancy was due to more men at top-level positions, but highlighted the fact the administration was hiring more women to junior positions in an effort to enact change. What people don't realize about the wage gap is that it's mostly generational. Baby boomer women are less likely to have gone to college than baby boomer men. So yes, when you factor in all the boomers, you'll see a big disparity. Gen X women went college more. Millennial women are more likely to go to college. Okay, I tell you what we're going to end up seeing in the next generation is an inversion of the wage gap. And I mean median salaries. Now, it is possible that risk pays better. So, guys working on oil rigs, women don't want to do that, and so they don't, or working in sewers, and that pays well, or like crime scene cleanup. But I think with all the men in college, what we'll likely end up seeing is an inversion, because what they don't take into consideration when it comes to the wage gap is age. Age is a big factor, your generation, what society was like, and your skill level. If most people in college today are women, what do you think it's going to look like in 10 years when these people are taking over industry? I will make one important point, however. I know a lot of people who are very successful and wealthy, and they didn't go to college. In fact, you can look at, Mark Zuckerberg, dropout, Bill Gates, dropout. Who else we got? Rob Dyrdek, okay? Hosts MTV show, different line of work. Successful, high school dropout. Me, high school dropout. And I'll tell you what, man, if these people are spending their time in college and other people are starting their own businesses, I think we're gonna have an interesting future where women are going to be heavily in debt relative to men. And men are going to be able to travel around and do whatever they want, but women won't be able to. So here's what we need to do. I'll wrap this one up. Take a look at everything happening now, and we need to think about what happens next. Majority of people in college are women. That means the majority of college debt is held by women, and that means you're going to have a future where women are massively in debt and men aren't. But it used to be the other way around. Men going to college, were in debt, but the women weren't going to college, so they weren't. It's inverting. Anyway, the main point of this video is that the Washington Post is being slammed by their own employees for having a wage gap. Aw, well, you reap what you sow, Washington Post. You can't claim that there's problems, and then the Washington Post issued a statement saying this is not true, you're lying. Sorry. These are the people you hired. Congratulations. I got one more segment coming up in a few minutes. Stick around. I will see you all shortly.